The land of Althea is an intriguing place to live in. Located on everyone's skin is a number that dictates the type of person they are on the inside. A count that drives them to work harder or strategically do whatever possible to stay afloat. For some, it's a count of how many times they help someone in need, driving them to do whatever they can to make the world a better place. For others, it's as simple as being told that their cooking tastes good, with the small goal of trying to offer the best food as possible. The flip, however, is if these goals aren't met, the opposite is achieved, and they're dragged down to a place called the Abyss, met with horrifying hands and a purple mist that drags them away. The type of people that keep these convictions are rewarded with strength and unique abilities the longer they keep up and increase the count. Whereas, if someone isn't working hard enough to excel, it ends up straying too far away from their goals, and they're dragged away in one of the most horrifying methods possible. It's a world where the drive to do your best is rewarded with true strength, and the slacking of such could very well lead to your death. The type of people you meet along the journey of this show have genuinely great moments with these character-defining traits, pushing and conflicting the plot in different areas, as the show explores how the world came to be this way, and what the consequences of absolute conviction can do to a society. Or at least that's what I would say that's what the show conveys. Within the first 5 minutes, the main character is sexually assaulted by the real main character. And all of that is forgiven because it turns out that he's a really cool and strong guy. So now our female protagonist is literally obsessed with him to the point of falling in love with him simply due to plot contrivances. And it has nothing to do with his personality. You see, I think that's the core issue of anime. Really awesome concepts that have elements that desensitize you over time. It's not that anime itself is bad in the slightest. I think even the least wholesome of shows have their messages and intrigue. But there's a lot in anime that is simply not okay that I've completely forgotten about until I sat down and watched Plunderer. I'll admit, despite how little of the show I actually loved, I still managed to sit down and watch all 24 episodes. It's genuinely got some really cool moments in it that had me at the edge of my seat, but I swear to God that it almost deliberately does something just to make me hate it to deter me from watching. And... alright, I think I'm allowed to make at least one negative video per year, so I'd figured why not point it towards the medium I spend the majority of my time with. I genuinely do love anime. I've probably spent more time in my life watching it than doing any other thing in my pastime. Except for sleeping, of course. And I think that's what contributed to me simply hand-waving away some of its less desirable features. At its core, it does an amazing job at storytelling. Even at the supernatural level, it tends to ground itself in an interesting way. I might not be a lesbian. I might not be a lesbian. I might not be a dragon, but I understand the concept of displacement, feeling as though you don't belong anywhere and finding yourself respected among people that you never thought would accept you. I've learned that working hard is its own reward from a loud green taijutsu ninja. Difficulties in my life could help me connect with others from a middle schooler that has a hard time conveying its emotions. I think it really says a lot when you have a medium that has very little limitations to it, where a lot of taboo topics are on the table, and it can lend credence to things being explored that hardly anything else talks about. I'm a pretty big fan of Western animation, but back in the 2000s, or even the early 2010s, cartoons never really explored deep concepts, and when they did, they were few and far apart. Of course, some dipped their feet into some taboo subjects, but for it to air on television, it would have to be toned down or implied. Budgets weren't as high, and interest in the general public was closer to passerby knowledge or memes of quippy one-liners. And the most ambitious of them were usually subjected to the same fate of being regulated due to networks thriving on reruns and not having the trust to put into projects that were episodic, usually causing them to have a status quo to follow, or episodes that anyone could hop into at any point. Then you get to anime and it's like, oh, who's that guy with the sword? Whoa, we just cut through someone! Now it's like, water everywhere, what the hell is going on? Seeing this stuff as a kid instantly hooked me as it aired on Toonami, and it's no wonder why I've fallen in love with the medium at large. There were things that I had no idea were even possible being portrayed by animation studios that do this stuff in a ton of anime. I believe that's why the likes of Naruto, Pokemon, and Dragon Ball Z became so popular. Its flashy animation drew the eyes of the youth with things that were never achieved over here. It's one thing to go to a movie theater and witness this glorious action-packed adventure, but another thing entirely when it's airing on television. Something that you can tune into every week to catch another exciting episode. But it wasn't just action and animation that can draw someone into the world of anime as well. There's a theme that these shows can follow that are hardly replicated over here in the West. Or at least they haven't been until anime took over the mainstream. I've never really come across any shows that can have the level of build-up and tension and release that anime does tend to have. Movies do a fantastic job of constructing a character's motivations and goals and have the entire plot try to challenge it, as well as their ideals. But seeing something done like that in the long form done by the likes of Death Note really accentuates how spending enough time with the character and empathizing can lead the viewer down a journey of entertainment as well as self-discovery. Light Yagami starts out the show just as the viewer does, bored and uninterested, curious and waiting for something to happen. His ideals are constructed around an entity that can kill simply by writing down the name of someone who's drawn in it. Light uses the book more and more, marrying himself to the idea of becoming a god, and so does his audience.
I'm a hard-working honor student who's considered to be one of Japan's best and brightest. And I will become the god of this new world.
So the audience takes the side of the person who's fighting for what he believes in. Each misstep, each evil thing he does, and every plan that he makes for a world that would be drastically changed hooked me in, and making me sympathize with Light's journey, thinking that he was right for wanting a world without violence. But it wasn't even until looking back again from a different lens that I've come to the conclusion that he's not just someone who wants justice for the world, or even be a martyr for a better world, but a person who saw a means for power and was corrupted by it all. Something that others surely had seen before, noticing all of the sensing turning points that have pitfalled the protagonist. A dual-layered interesting story that has the narrative consistency of which can be looked back on in a new light the more you go back and observe the story unfolding. Barring the adult themes in the animation, something like this could only really be attained by me if I were to read a book, and I mean, like, come on, who reads books anymore? Speaking of adult themes, I think there's a bit of an elephant in the room that anime has that some other forms of media seem to shy away from. It's obvious there's a sexualization issue going on in Japan, and that's being blasted front and center with its shows. The otaku culture is conflated with this more negative side of objectifying women as well as sexualizing things that shouldn't be. I'm a huge fan of Dragon Maid Kobayashi and Made in Abyss. I made a video about them. Check them out, please. If you do, I'll give you a hug. But they tend to accentuate things that kind of have no reason being there. Kind of. I'll say more on this in a bit, but Made in Abyss tends to take it too far. But this type of objectifying and unnecessary sexualization is everywhere, much like the aforementioned show Plunderer. Sometimes it would have a perfectly reasonable and interesting plot point that's happening, and only to ruin it with unnecessary panty shots and naked women. It's actually a bit frustrating when I'm actually trying to get into something and it's ruined by the incredibly cliche scenes of a character accidentally walking in on someone taking a bath and it being played up for comedy. Now, I do think sexualization can be done right, a controversial opinion that I've never been able to voice yet. But considering my retention rate drops around the 4-minute mark, I should be safe. There are shows that do this in a very unique way, such as Made in Abyss, which plays up the violent exposures of the protagonist, which shows how exposed and vulnerable they are to the dangerous world around them. Each scene shows the harshness that caused them to be this exposed, and just how little of a chance they have to survive. The incredibly gruesome, must-look-away moment shine a better spotlight on the grueling innocence being ripped away from them at every turn. Kill la Kill, however, takes an opposite approach, leaning into the idea that clothing is something that binds you to an identity. The more heavily you lean on your reliance on appearance and status, the easier it is for you to be taken over and controlled. If you've ever seen it, the show tends to have almost a parody-like approach to the presentation of nudity, or even outright embraces it. But my favorite example of sexualization done right is something that seems exactly what it seems out to parody at first glance. Mimi Me is an electronica music video that has tons of visual representation of sexual nature, addiction, and even violence, having a character that goes from a relatively normal person to a trippy representation of women smothering and taking over his life. Much like what can happen to people who dig too deep on that side of the industry. Hentai, virtual waifus, and the obsession of femininity and beauty can easily creep up on a person, spiraling them down into being a casual enjoyer of a series to a downright decrepit fan, obsessing with the muddled reality of fantasy and desire. The music lulls the watcher into a hypnotic display of sexual beauty as the visuals dance along, dragging you deeper and deeper into this pit. It's a fantastic music video with a dangerous message disguised as the very thing it seeks to highlight. Gaijin Goomba does a really good job of breaking down this music video, and you can find a link about that in the description. And while it's not an anime in its own right, the classification and depiction of the medium is pretty amazing. Because, in the end, anime itself is a culture and thematic expression. Sure, there are plenty of shows that have these negative themes behind them and that are downright weird. But it's also what makes it stand out. It gives it room to shock someone into accepting new points if they're willing to give the time to see it. The creative passion projects behind some of the greatest anime that I know are weird as hell. But I love them all the more for it, good or bad. And you know what? Maybe Plunderer isn't that bad of a show after all. It has moments that are breathtaking, leaving me in awe as some scenes go by. After sitting through it all, I was rewarded pretty heavily by an awesome culmination of a love for the medium. The main character overcomes his darkness and is able to defeat the big bad dude. And the original villain comes back and helps the hero. But he doesn't even have any of his power anymore, so he's like fighting with the power level of 1. He's like toe-to-toe with someone who's one of the most powerful people in the world. And wait, no, I didn't even get to the part where this guy right here, he's...
Blank!
Wait, huh?
You okay?
You're what pulled me out of there.
Is that so?
Wait, wait, huh?
It really did help.
Which means I have a reward coming. So let's make babies!
Oh, come on! Yo, I'm Blinkehyo. Subscribble if you want, or you can like if you want. But if you don't, that's fine. Cause we're still cool, right? Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.